بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ونور قلوبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. نوينا تعلم وتعليم والتذكر وتذكير والنفع والاندفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم، ودعاء إلى الهدى والإداء الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى مع لطف وعافية برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علم لدني وشرب صافي الهني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم إنا نسألك علم لدني وشرب صافي الهني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم إنا نسألك علم لدني ومشرب صافي الهني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه في كل لحظة أبدا عاد نعم الله وأفضاله. اللهم آتنا من لدنك رحمة وعلمنا من لدنك علما. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم ألهمنا علما نفقه به أوامرك ونواهيك وارزقنا فهما نعرف به كيف نناجيك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين وإلهام الملائكة المقربين في عافية يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أغننا بالعلم وزينا بالحلم وأكرمنا بالتقوى وجملنا بالعافية يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم إنا نستودعك ما قرأناه وما نقرأه في هذا المجلس وما قبله وما بعده، فاحفظه علينا حتى ترده إلينا وقت احتياجنا إليه يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أكرمنا بنور الفهم وأخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وافتح لنا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم يا من مقاليد الأمور كلها بيده وإليه يرجع الأمر كله، يا فتاح يا عليم، يا فتاح يا عليم، يا فتاح يا عليم، افتح علينا فتحا قريبا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وسدد لساني واهدي قلبي وافعل كذلك بأحبابي أبدا وارزقنا كمال فتوح العارفين والفقه في الدين مع كمال الإخلاص والصدق واليقين والعافية والغنى والنصر والحفظ والنفع والانتفاع وخيرة الدارين وعلوم الأولين والآخرين. آمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين 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 يا رب العالمين. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله. I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for gathering us, even though it's online, around his blessed book subhanahu wa ta'ala, around the Shifa, Shifa. And that's one of the names of Surah Al-Fatiha, and also the Quran. It's called Shifa. Right? What is the cure? Right? And yesterday, before the Khatam every week here in Tarif, Habib Omar, he will always give a short kalima, just a reminder, right, to to increase people's enthusiasm and people's attachment and people's desire, right? A drive to get close to the Quran. And he always give like a short kalima. Right? And mashallah, I always look forward to his kalima, his short kalima at the beginning of the khatam. And yesterday he was mentioning about how the Quran is really and truly a cure in every way and form. Like it's a physical cure, it is a mental cure, it's an emotional cure, and most importantly, it is a spiritual cure. A spiritual cure meaning against inclinations towards sin, inclinations towards things that are low that human beings should not be engaged in. Subhanallah. Right? So he was saying that, and he was saying that it is only a cure for those who hold the Quran in high regard. Right? Those who ta'zim and have his ta'zim, those who have ta'zim of the Quran. Right? Those who hold the Quran in high regard, it is a cure for such people. Subhanallah. Right? So or those who exalt the Quran, those who aggrandize the Quran. Right? So if somebody finds that if they say they keep reading Quran and they keep going to the Quran and they still have all these issues, right? Then the problem is it is in the ta'zim, right? It is in there's a problem in their exaltation of the Quran, right? And la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Like it is that sometimes we exalt other things in this world, right? In that we have higher belief in these things as compared to the Quran. And people sometimes may Allah forgive us for we fall short. Like we tend to, that when people say, you read Surah Fatiha into the water and drink it, and it will help you, it will cure you. Like in the sense that the thiqah, right, or the you say the belief in that is not as strong as when someone would say, oh, we have a headache, right? Can you go take some Panadol or go take some, antibiotics, go take some, like you just like, be honest with ourselves. Like people would just, be inclined towards medication. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, right? It is asbab, that it is of the means that Allah has put on this earth, right? But you will see the thiqah, right? The thiqah meaning the trust, right? So that how many of us, when you have a headache, right? When you have a headache, straight away, go to a form of medication, right? Rather than going to the verse, لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل, right? That verse is known that if you recite that verse and you place your hand on your head, that your headache will be gone. Subhanallah, there is a very famous story of Sayyidina Umar and the Roman king. Actually, there was a Roman king who, was in the caliphate of Sayyidina Umar. There was a Roman king, right? There was a Roman king who was complaining of a persistent headache, right? And Sayyidina Umar, he gave this Roman king imama of Kufiya. Basically, he gave this Roman king, a sunko and a kufiya or an imama, right? And told this Roman king to put it on instead of his crown, right? And so initially, the Roman king was skeptical. He was like, take off my crown, to put on this, like it was a very humble headwear, right? So, but they said to him, just do it, right? So he took off his crown, he put on the very humble, headwear from Sayyidina Umar, and his headache disappeared, right? So every time so whenever he has a headache, he'll put on that sonko, right, or the kufiya that Sayyidina Umar gave him. Right, so after a while, he was wondering, what's the secret here? Right, what's going on? Right, so he looked into. So one day he just took the kufiya, the sonko, right, and then he looked closely, and he saw on the inner lining, like it was written, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the Basmala of Sayyidina Umar. The Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim was written on the inside of the sonko. Right, and there is Sayyidina Umar's, the taqwa, right? His strong belief, right? The basmala is enough as a cure, right? The basmala, and they are of the righteous. That whenever they fall sick, right, they would just sit and they would take their tasbih, right? They would take their tasbih at their prayer beats, and they would just go Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And with the basmala, it is also a form of dhikr, right? So they would do that, right? They would do that, right? To as many times as Allah has willed for them to do it, mashallah, right? And there will be an immediate cure for them, subhanallah. But it's just really, it's really, your thiqah, right? It's just really your belief. Like the very famous story in Khalid bin Walid, whereby they give him a cup of poison, and this is like a fatal poison. It will kill a person just by drinking a sip, right? They give him an entire cup of it, of poison that would kill a person. He said, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Or he said, Bismillahir Ladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wala fis sama'i huwa as-sami'ul 'alim. He said that. And that is basically taqwa in the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? That is trust, or belief in the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whoever recites this, nothing can harm them. Right? That really nothing can harm them. And he swallowed the entire cup, and nothing happened to him. Nothing. Subhanallah. But it's just really, it's a ta'zim. We call it, it is really an exaltation, an aggrandization of the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And you can see, and we can see that we have that towards medication. We actually have a ta'zim on medication. Our zaman, us, our people, we have a ta'zim on medication, a strong reliance and trust in medication, that if I don't take this, I will not be cured. Like in a sense, some people they have that belief, right? And more than they do with the Quran. So when you say, you're having some illness, go and read Surah Yasin. They'll be like, okay, then then what? Read Surah Yasin. Right? What other then do you need? Subhanallah. Anyway, he was just saying that it is really a cure. In fact, it's an immediate cure. It's an immediate cure. Right? But it's really your belief. It's your belief, your yaqeen, right, in it. There's a story of, I think, Imam al-Haddad, one of the awliya, right? Whereby there was he had a servant, right? He had a servant. It was another wali. I think it was Imam al-Haddad. But anyway, he had a servant, right? And then when people would be bothered by the jinn, the jinn would, might possess a person or whatever, and bother people, right, in the town. So they would bring like a possessed person to the imam, right? And the imam would recite, of certain verses, right, to get rid of the, of the evil spirit, right? So the imam would recite some verses, and immediately, right, the evil spirit will be weakened, and then, in a sense, like humbled, and then the imam can just, get rid of it. So one day, the imam was away. He wasn't in the town, and someone came. Right, someone came with a person who was possessed, right, and then he came to the house and then asked for the imam, right, and then the servant said, "Oh, the imam's not around." Then the other day was like, "Oh, but I have this, but my family member is being bothered by an evil spirit." Right. So do you know what to do? And then the servant was like, "Oh, I've seen the imam do this so many times. Okay, I've seen the imam do this so many times. I can do it." Right. So because the servant by this time had memorized what were the verses that the imam would recite. Right. So the person, he placed his hand on the possessed individual, right, and then he began to recite the verses, of what the imam would usually recite. So when he recited it, right, the possessed person, right, who has a jinn inside of him, right, the jinn spoke up, and the jinn said, and the jinn laughed. It's quite scary. But the jinn laughed, And the jinn said, the verses are the same, but the heart is different. The verses are the same, but the heart is different. And the jinn was laughing and laughing and laughing. Like you read the same ayat, but your heart is different. Your yaqeen are all different. And the imam is something, you are something. Right? And the imam's yaqeen in the verses, like, will destroy the jinn. Right? But your yaqeen, the jinn was laughing, right, at the person. So sorry. Right. So these are true stories. I don't tell like fake stories, true stories. But yeah, like, this is basically what it is. You know, like the jinn can laugh, right? Because mm, uh, mm, because subhanallah, hawla wala quwwata illa billah. Okay, so anyway, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Naam. Mm, tamam. Okay, right. So okay. So anyway, I'm just continuing our class, right? So just mentioning about the about all these things. Mashallah. Okay, so anyway, we continue with our class. And we are entering into the first part of Surah Baqarah. Right. So I think we have finished. I think so. I can't remember. But I think we have finished Surah Al-Fatiha, right, after quite a number of lessons. So we're going to end in Surah Baqarah today, inshallah, the first few verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. So I will recite the first part. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك الذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك بالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون صدق الله العظيم. الحمد لله. صدق الله العلي العظيم وقد بلغ النبي الكريم النبي الوافي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاكرين والشاكرين والذاكرين ومؤمنين ويكون لنا إن شاء الله حجة يوم القيامة وليس علينا. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken the truth, and our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has indeed relayed the message, and he has fulfilled the trust that was placed on him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we are of those who witness to this. We are a witness to this, and we are grateful for this, and of those who inshallah remember the message sent to us, or we remember and we mention this message that was sent to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the Quran for us a proof on the day of judgment and not against us. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Right, so we are on the first part of Surah Baqarah. I'll give like an overview of what this entire surah is about. And this surah, mashallah, this surah, Surah Baqarah, it is the longest surah in the Quran. And there are many different sections in this surah that we can that this surah goes into. So it's an extensive surah. It goes over 2.5 juz, more or less. Right? So it's about 2.5 juz. it begins with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laying out for the human being the three groups of human beings, right? Which is basically the believer, the disbeliever, and the hypocrite, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he goes into, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about his creation. And so there's a verse that speaks about the mosquito, and Allah speaks about his creation in a bit. And then Allah goes into the first story in the Quran, which is the story of Nabi Adam alayhi salam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes into addressing the Bani Israel, and he goes into the stories of the Bani Israel, and then he goes into more of the stories of the story of the Bani Israel will be lengthy for the book to be this lengthy story, right? Then it goes into the story of Nabi Ibrahim, the Bani Israel, and you have Nabi Musa and so on, all of the stories of Bani Israel, right? And then you have the story of Nabi Ibrahim thereafter, right? So so mashallah, so the entire first juz, right? The entire first juz, a lot of it actually addresses it actually a huge portion of it addresses the hypocrites, right, amongst the disbelievers, right? I mean, among the disbelievers in Medina at that time, right, and the hypocrites amongst the people of the book, and all of this, right, is directed towards the believer who is reading the Quran, right? Because the Quran is, who are the majority of the people who read and should be studying the Quran. You will say the believers, right? Right. So of course there are non-Muslims that come to the Quran to, out of curiosity, or seeking the truth, looking for the truth, and they read the Quran. But to look at the entire world and who are the people who recite the Quran or learn the Quran, memorize the Quran, you will say, more than 99% of it will be believers, right? So which means this Quran is being recited by believers. A majority of them in our world today will be the believers who are reciting the Quran. So which is why, as you come to the Quran, we look at the Quran, and we're looking at it as believers. Believers in the Quran, believers in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, inshallah. May Allah allow us to die as believers. Right. So so then comes the question, that from the very beginning of the Quran, there's all this, indication and talk, about a lot of pointing, right, towards the Bani Israel and lessons, right, from the Bani Israel, the people of the book, right? So, and mashallah, the Quran, and from the beginning of the Quran as well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what I just recited just now, right, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear that this book, it is a guidance, right? So take it as a guidance, right? So this book is not something that is I'll say merely, even though it is a great thing, but I'll use the word merely compared to and understanding it and following its guidance. So this book is not merely for recitation and then placing it up at the shelf just to be recited every day and putting it on the shelf without learning it, right? Because it's not, and again, even though and again, to emphasize that reciting the Quran itself is a great thing, right? It is a great thing, right? But it's not merely for that, right? It's not just for that, right? People recite the Quran for the barakah, right? So they read the Quran, they want the blessings for the day. They want to begin their day, in blessings. Alhamdulillah, that is a good thing, right? But that's not what the Quran is merely for, right? It's not just for that, right? While the barakah, the blessings in the Quran is immense, right, and beyond what you can understand. And in fact, the most blessed, right, of what we have in our hands will be the words of the Quran, right? But we, it's like the purpose of the Quran, right? While that is one of the that you see the functions, or what we can use the Quran for as barakah, that you place an ayat in your house, right? You recite, some ayats before you leave your house, and you have your portion of the Quran that you do every day, right? It's not just for that, right? It's not just for that, right? But the main purpose of the Quran, right, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, is the guidance, As what knowledge is about. Like, knowledge is not meant for you to just, read it and then get on with your life without paying any heed or, paying any attention to it. That's not the point of knowledge, right? And unfortunately, right, we do have that in our time. In our zaman, we do learn all kinds of stuff, and then it has almost no application in our life. Right? We do, eh? Like, we grow up and we learn all kinds of things. And it almost has almost no application in our life. Right? So don't do that to the Quran. Right? Don't do that to the Quran. Like, read it, read it, read it, and then having no application in your life. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And just and maybe, mashallah, um the other day when I was in my class, our teacher was mentioning, right, that towards the end of time, the Quran will be taken away, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يرفع القرآن, right? The Quran will be taken. Allah will lift the Quran and it will be taken. Right? So it will be taken, the pages will be blank. Right? The pages of the Quran or the Mus'haf will be blank. The those who have memorized the Quran, right? Of the true scholars who have memorized the Quran, true meaning that they apply what they have memorized, they will have passed away, and all of them will have been will have passed away. Those who memorize the Quran and are not true memorizers of the Quran, meaning those who memorize, right, but they only do so, like in the hadith of the first people to be flung into the hellfire, right, are those who, they learn the Quran to recite and memorize, like, just so people could say, oh, mashallah, what a beautiful reciter. Oh, mashallah, what a beautiful voice, right? And that was the only reason, with no other reason, right, why they memorized the Quran, why they were reciting the Quran. These are the first people to be flung to the hellfire because of their sincerity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a deed that is so great that should be fully focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the people who memorize Quran for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran will be removed from their hearts. Right? So the Quran will be removed from their hearts. Right? And that is and she was saying that is because Allah yaghar. Allah yaghar, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a ghira. He has a ghira over his book. And what is a ghira? A ghira is a form of, like, protectiveness. Right? So Allah is protective over his book. Right? So if people are just using his book, right, to gain popularity, or to, or they're memorizing it, and then they're blatantly going against it, right? What is in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah protects his book. Allah is protective, over his book. So Allah takes it away, right, from them, right, because it's being abused. Right? People are not giving this book its right. Right? So Allah takes it away. That is why towards the end of time it will be taken away. Right? Because it will come to a point whereby nobody, right, on the face of this earth is using the Quran in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to do. Right? From the beginning of Surah Baqarah, Allah has said, Hudan lil muttaqin, a guidance. So when people stop taking the Quran as a guidance, right, but they're using the Quran in whatever ways they are using to gain, in their dunya, right, in their worldly, pursuits, then Allah is protective over his book. I don't use his book for something that is so low as a dunya, right? So he takes it away, right, from from human beings. Maybe not see that day. Maybe not see that day. Because when that happens, that's one of the signs of really, really the world will come to an end, right? Because the guidance has been removed. The Allah subhanahu, which means those that continue after that period of time when the Quran is lifted, and those who exist, right, they are of the worst of human beings, and because there's no guidance, right, for them, and that is only because of what their hearts have their hearts have earned for themselves. Subhanallah. So mashallah. Now, right, so that's the first juz of the Quran, right? The first juz goes into a lot of stories, and also a lot of that you will see reprimand from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as well as Allah mentioning the good deeds of or the good behavior, not even deeds, but the behavior and the states of the believers. Subhanallah. That's the first part, right, of the that's the first part, right, of the first juz. The second juz, brings us into it opens up, right, by the law of the Qibla. So it opens up with the law, and as you go into the juz, right, you will see in the second juz, it is law after law after law. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains the different, laws from alcohol, right, to the orphan, right, to marriage and divorce, right, to what is halal, what is haram to consume, right, and so on. Right? So laws are coming in the second juz. Right. So and then after the second juz, right, we come into and the second juz comes to an end, the story of Nabi Dawood alayhi salam and Jalut. Right, so it comes to the end in the story, and inshallah, as you go through, we will link up everything, right, in this juz. The third juz opens up with the story of no, it's a Hajj. Right, so the second juz ends off with now Hajj, right, and then the third juz opens up with Ayatul Kursi. Right, so Ayatul Kursi and is the greatest ayat in the Quran, and there will be like a commentary on Ayatul Kursi, right, and then it goes there's the story thereafter, right, and then it goes into a bit more laws, right, about riba and so on, right, and then the surah ends, right. So with Amana Rasul, right? So there's a full, mashallah, this surah, it is the longest surah in the Quran, right? It says Surah Baqarah, right? A house in which Surah Baqarah is recited, by the shayateen cannot come into this house for 3 days. There's a story about a true story, that happened in Tabuk, right? Tabuk meaning in our zaman Tabuk, right? Whereby there was a woman who was a witch, right? Basically doing a lot of black magic, right? Witchcraft, black magic, right? And they basically raided her house, and they found all of this stuff, like, in her house. Is a story in our zaman. She raided her house. They found all this stuff in her house, of all kinds of hair, and potions, and a list of names. And they found a list of names of people that she black magic, right? And so basically, it's her business. So anyone who wants to black magic someone else, they would go to her, right? And they would inform her of who they want, black magic to be afflicted onto, right? And then she would do the black magic, and she could take a samla, she could take an amount from them, right? It's all this recent, it's a very recent story. So la hawla wala quwwata illa billah, that this kind of behavior, you see that there's no taqwa. And no taqwa on the one who's doing it, who's the witch herself, and no taqwa on the people who are going to witches, and asking for black magic, to be done on someone else. Like, what's the, like, subhanAllah, no belief in the hereafter even. So the first few ayats of Surah Baqarah, speaks about those who have yaqeen, right? So the word yuqinun, those who have yaqeen, because Allah differentiates, right, from those who have iman, right, those who believe, right, and those who have yaqeen, right, those who have certainty, because this is obvious, right, that is different, right, because of their behavior. And so the story goes that they raided her house, and they caught her, because they were giving people were complaining that she's because witchcraft, black magic, it is a major sin in Islam. In fact, it is on shirk. Like, it falls into shirk because of a person's reliance on on the jinn. Right, that's one thing. And there's the evil they do also. Right? There's a lot of evil, right, in what they do. Destroying people's families, destroying their health, destroying their jobs, and those who have been afflicted by black magic, you will know, right, that the evil is so terrible, right, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed right, for black magic to afflict our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, in a way that is becoming of for a prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as we know, in our aqidah, that for prophets, right, they can be afflicted, right, by calamity. They can be afflicted by disease. They can be afflicted by black magic, but a small amount, right? Not enough to stop them from their mission, right? As being prophets, right? So for Rasulullah, the Jew had afflicted him with black magic. It was supposed to kill him, right? But all it did to him was cause him to have some like lapses in his memory, right? That was all it did, made him feel uneasy and comfortable, right? But there was nothing further than that. But it was supposed to kill him, that magic. But he did not allow for it. But Allah allowed for an effect, right, to happen to Rasulullah, right, as a way of teaching the ummah that these things are real, right? These things are real, and they will continue till the end of time. And we'll come to that ayah in Surah Baqarah. In Surah Baqarah, Allah points it out, right? وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. And the story, there'll be a part where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they follow, right? And they follow what the shaitan were reciting, right? In the kingdom of Sulaiman. وَمَا كَفَرَ Sulaiman. And Sulaiman was not a disbeliever, because the Jews were claiming, oh, magic is from Sulaiman, Nabi Sulaiman, right? But it was the shayateen who were doing the kufr, right? When I get into those verses, we will speak about it, because these are things that Allah is, everything in the Quran, right, is relevant in every zaman, and necessarily so, because it is a book of guidance, right? So that Allah mentions this clearly in Surah Baqarah. Allah mentions it in Surah Falaq. Right? Allah mentions it. That this is real things. Right? So anyway, Rasulullah, and for him to show us, how do you handle such things? How do you handle the magic that is being applied, that is being afflicted onto you? So this woman, I'm going to start with this woman. This woman had a list of names, right? And these people who the policemen, basically was like authorities who raided her house. It's their story of what they saw when they raided her house, and what they saw in her house. Is it was from the outside, it looked like a normal house, but when they raided her house on the inside, it was the scariest like thing you've ever seen in your life. Like if really what's going on in there, and the stench in there, the najis in there, and everything, because shaitan loves najis, right? Shaitan loves filth, right? So the environment that people keep shayateen, when they keep all the jinn, they are in filth and in najis. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Subhanallah, there is, I keep going off track, but then but there is a hadith, right, that is called Bid'ah, right? It's called Bid'ah. There's a hadith called Sunnah. Sunnah is a hadith whereby, it's called Hadith Jibril, right? Whereby it's a famous hadith, but Rasulullah was sitting down, Sayyidina Umar narrates this, right? And Sayyidina Umar, he says that they were once sitting down with Rasulullah when a man appeared, right? And this man had the whitest of clothes, he had the blackest of hair, right? No one can see any sign of travel on him, yet none of us knew him. That's a very famous hadith, right? And the man came, in the most, in the most, proper manner, in the most etiquette, and sat in front of the Prophet with full manners, right? Placing his hands on his own thighs, and then he begins asking questions. Oh Muhammad, tell me about Islam, tell me about Iman, tell me about Ihsan, tell me about the hour, and tell me about its signs, right? So at the end of the hadith, right, Nabi Muhammad asked Sayyidina Umar, or Umar, do you know who was the questioner? Right? And Sayyidina Umar said, Allah and His Prophet know best. And Nabi Muhammad said that it was Jibril, he came to you to teach you the knowledge of your religion. That's the hadith, and that's called Sunnah. It is like a base hadith in the Sunnah, because from that one hadith, the entire of Islam is summarized, right? And then it's called Hadith Jibril. there is a hadith that is exactly the opposite. Like a very frightening hadith. Exactly the opposite. And this hadith is called Bid'ah. And it's called Hadith Iblis. Right? It's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. It's called Bid'ah, and it's called Hadith Iblis. Right? So this hadith was narrated by Ibn Umar, the son of Sayyidina Umar, right? And I was talking to my cousin about this hadith, and I was saying that, it's interesting how the first hadith Sayyidina Umar narrated it, but the second hadith his son narrated. Right? It was as if Iblis waited until Sayyidina Umar was not present, then he appeared because Iblis is terrified of Sayyidina Umar's shadow, right? When Sayyidina Umar takes a path, Iblis is another path. He's called Sayyidina Umar. So it's interesting how Sayyidina Umar was not present at this second hadith. Right? How come he was not there to narrate it? Because probably Iblis was too scared to appear when he's around. Right? So he only appeared when Sayyidina Umar's not around. He appears. So the hadith goes that Sayyidina Ibn Umar, and it's exactly the opposite in the entire, how the hadith goes. Right? So the hadith goes that Sayyidina Ibn Umar, he narrates, right, that while they were sitting with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when a man with the ugliest face, right, and the worst stench appeared, that he barged in, right, and he began walking and like walking over the shoulders of people. Right? This is something that's very bad adab, very bad etiquette. He was like going across people and walking over their shoulders, forcing his way, right, to the front to sit in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So you see how the hay'ah and the state of the questioner is so different. You say that Jibril alayhi salam, he was proper, he was clean, he was beautiful, he was murattab, right? You say he was, he was neat and clean, mashallah, and then he came in gently, he sat down gently, and so on. The second hadith goes, oh, he was ugly and he was smelly and he was so disgusting, and he came and he pushed people around and he stood over, he went over their shoulders, and he was, and he came to the Prophet in that way. Right? So opposite, mashallah. And then Jibril, he begins asking the question by saying, Ya Muhammad, right? And so he addressed the Prophet. The second hadith, there was no address. Right? There was no adab whatsoever. It's rude, right? This is complete rudeness. And the questioner begins by saying, who created the sky? And Nabi Muhammad says, Allah. And then the questioner says, who created this and who created that? So there's a long question, and who created you? And then every single time Nabi Muhammad and the way it was asked was like in that way, like who created? So eventually the questioner says, and who created you? And then Nabi Muhammad says, Allah. And then the questioner goes, and who created Allah? Right? So he goes in that way, right? And then Rasulullah lowered his head, right? And he placed his hand, on his forehead, and he said, Subhanallah. He said, Subhanallah. So and then this person that appeared out of nowhere, right? He goes off, right? He goes off. And then Rasulullah said to the Sahaba, get the man, go and get that man. So they went out to look for the man to take him back, but they couldn't find him. They couldn't find the man. Right. So then Rasulullah said to them, do you know who that was? Do you know who that was? And of course he did it only Allah's, and the Prophet knows best, right? And then he said, that was Iblis. Right? There was Iblis. He came to you to make you doubt your religion. Subhanallah. Right? So the opposite, even the last statement was opposite. Right? There was the first one, there was Jibril. He came to you to teach you the methods of your religion. Right? And then for Iblis, he came to you to make you doubt your religion. Oh, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And there's a full explanation of the hadith of what Iblis was trying to do, right? In this in this situation. So anyway, this is to show that the shaitan, right, they go for all things ugly and all things, disgusting and all things. So there's like you see an exact opposite hadith. Right? To hadith Jibril is exact opposite hadith, a hadith Iblis. Right. So anyway, and then going to this goes Surah Baqarah. Surah Baqarah, it is a protection, right, against the evil, right, that's out there, and all forms of evil. Right. So anyway, this back to the woman's story. I still not finished the woman's story. So the woman's story, right? She so basically they look at her list. She has a list of names, and they asked her what are these names, and then and there were some indications, some marks on every name. So she was like, oh, these are the names of the people who I send black magic to. Right? I send black magic to these people, right? And the names next to it are the people who have instructed me to do so, right? And then when they saw the list, they were horrified that a lot of the times, right? Almost more than 90% of the names there, the people who sent the black magic were direct family members, right? Direct family members who sent the black magic, right? So either like a cousin or an auntie or whatever it is that they are relatives to the one whom they sent black magic to. So evil, so evil. So then there were some marks, next to it, and they asked her, "What are these marks?" So she says, "This is a number of times that I sent the black magic." Right? And whether or not, the black magic afflicted them, right? So they saw a particular name, right? And they saw next to it the marks that almost more than 10 times black magic was sent to this particular individual, but every single time it failed, right? It couldn't go through, right? Every single time it failed. So they asked her, what about this one, right? This name, particular name over here. And then she said, oh, this person is so hard to send anything to her. Right? So hard to put magic on her. And then she said, and then this woman at the witch says, my jinn tell me that when they go over to her house to bother her, right, and to cause mischief, in the house, that they can't see her. They can't actually see any human being in the house. They can't see. The jinn cannot see, right? And they can't get into the house. There's a force field, a barrier around the entire house. They come near only they're unable to go further. There's a block over the entire house of this woman. They can't enter. Subhanallah. And when they try to look through the window, right, to see, to try and to try and get to her, right, they can't actually see the human beings, the jinn. The human beings become invisible to the jinn. Right? They can't actually see the human beings in the house, but they can hear voices. They can hear that there are people in the house, right? But they can't see them. So the authorities were curious about this, right? So they took down this woman's name and her where she lived, and of course they caught this witch basically. So they went to this woman's house to find out what's her secret, what's she doing, and she went to her house, and it was a normal house. It's a woman with her family and like some children, and it's a simple family and lives there in the house, right? So they went to her, right, and then they told her, right, what they found out. And she was like, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Then they said to her, but the what's interesting is that your house, like the jinn can't enter, they can't bother you, and they can't even see you. Right? The jinn can't even see you. So what's your amalan? What do you do every day? What's your amalan? Right? And of her answers, she has like a set of amalan that she does. Right? Of her answers, right, she said that she recites Surah Baqarah. She has a daily wirid of reading Surah Baqarah every single day. Right? Every single day, and mashallah. And people in Tarim, they do that. Right? The people in Tarim, of their wirid is Surah Baqarah every single day. They do Surah Baqarah in 1 hour. Very fast. Surah Baqarah. But they do it every single day. She recites Surah Baqarah every single day. right? And that is the strength that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed, right, in the protection around this, around her household. And so not just the house, but the human beings are protected because the jinn can see the human beings, right, in the house. Subhanallah. So how we see that they are invisible to us, and we can't see them, the jinn. Like it's possible for them not to see us either, right? If you are constant on your Quran, right? They can't see you, and they can't. And when you remove your clothes, you say, Bismillah, is it say Allah, Bismillah, Muhammad. You say, La ilaha illahu, right? Bismillah, la ilaha illahu. Right? So you say that when you remove your clothes, they can't see your aura. They can't see your aura, no, can they play with your aura, right? The jinn are like that, the shaitan. Shayateen they're not decent creatures, right? They're indecent. Subhanallah. Right, so anyway, Alhamdulillah, right? So that is one of the you see the fada'il of Surah Baqarah. I'm going to the fada'il, the virtues of the surah, right? And so it is that so Surah Baqarah, you won't, there are of the verses in Surah Baqarah, right, that were revealed in Mecca, and there are of the verses of Surah Baqarah that were revealed in Al-Madinah, right? So it was a very long surah, right? So it is, you won't say that it is specifically, Meccan or Medina, where it was revealed, right? So so when we look at first and foremost, when you look at the name of the surah, right? The name of the surah, right? And the name of the surah is the word Baqarah, right? And it's interesting because there are no Baqarahs in Arabia. Baqarah means cow, right? You will see cows around Arabia, right? Cows are not natural to the desert in Arabia, right? So it's not a known animal, right? Nor do they, have, nor they revere cows, right? So mashallah, and mashallah, whenever we read about Rasulullah and that he drinks milk, right? The milk is, most of the time the milk will be goat's milk, right? They drink goat's milk, or sometimes they drink camel's milk, right? But almost never it is cow's milk. We are the ones who drink cow's milk. We are in our zaman, right? But because the Arabs don't actually rear cows, right? Because of the environment. So it's interesting that the first thing that we see in the Quran, in the first surah that we see in the Quran, is a surah, right? The name of the surah is an animal that is not known to the Arabs, right? Subhanallah, right? So subhanallah, right? So and that pulls the attention, right, of the reader, right? Especially in Dawah Rasulullah, it pulls their attention because it's an animal they're not familiar with, subhanallah. And then later on, when we go into the story of the Baqarah, we will see that why the surah is named after the animal in there. It is said that the names of the surahs in the Quran, right, a lot of it comes from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He himself would name the surahs, right? He would call the surahs specific things or specific names, right? So so that's why we get our name to the surahs from. And sometimes, it is the Sahaba, right, who call the surahs certain things, which is why it could be that one surah has several names. It could be, right? There are of surahs they have several names, right? But usually a surah is named, right, if the beginning part is unique, like Surah Yasin, Surah Taha is unique. There's no other surah in the Quran that begins in that way, right? That is usually called by the first word, right, in the surah, or the first letters in the surah, right? Or if there is a unique story, right, in the surah, like Surah Baqarah has a unique story of the Baqarah, right? Nowhere else in the Quran will you find the story of the Baqarah, right? So it's a unique mention, right, in that surah, right? So that, for example, Surah Ankabut has a unique mention of the spider, right? Surah if you see Surah An-Nahl has a unique mention of the bee, right, in the surah. There's something that is unique in that surah, right? And there are, so basically, is the name of the surah, right? They are just to point you to what surah we're talking about. So the surah that has the Baqarah in it, right? The one that speaks about the Baqarah in it. Right? In that way, right? So that in the way Rasulullah would say, recite Alif Lam Mim Sajda. Right? So what does it mean? Alif Lam Mim Sajda? The surah that begins with Alif Lam Mim and has the word and has a sajda in it. Right? Surah Sajda lah, basically. Right? Because a lot of surahs begin with Alif Lam Mim. Right? Surah Baqarah begins with Alif Lam Mim. Surah Al-Imran begins with Alif Lam Mim. A lot of surahs begin with Alif Lam Mim. Right? And inshallah, when we go into the tafsir of Alif Lam Mim, we will speak more about it. Right? About this huruf muqatta'ah. The letters that come by themselves at the beginning of many surahs, in fact, right, in the Quran. And there are certain letters that repeat themselves, like Hamim, Alif, Lam, Mim. And there are some letters that are unique to one surah, like Yasin and Taha and Surah Maryam. Inshallah. Inshallah, we will stop there for today, and I will continue next week, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad. الفاتحة الفاتحة على الله رزق العمل نافع وعمل خاص وإلى أرواح المعلمين مشايخنا وذوي حضرة النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام
ورحمة الله وبركاته أستاذة.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.